The first time Mason Hale noticed the smoke, it barely registered in his mind. It was just a thin gray line rising from the hillside beyond the pine ridge, blending into the evening sky as if it belonged there. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dry grass, and the wind carried dust along the narrow path he followed every day. Out here, small fires weren't unusual. People passed through the hills all the time. But Mason noticed anyway. Maybe it was because he had started noticing everything lately. When you had nowhere to go, the smallest details became impossible to ignore. Just a week earlier, he had still had a home. Not a perfect one, but it had been something. A roof, a bed, a place where he at least knew where he belonged. Then it was gone. The memory still sat heavy in his chest. "You're not staying here anymore." His stepfather's voice had been cold, flat, like the decision had already been made long before that moment. Mason had stood on the porch, gripping the strap of his duffel bag, waiting. Waiting for his mother to say something. To step in. To stop it. But she didn't. She stayed in the background, silent, her eyes turned away as if she couldn't bear to look at him. That silence hurt more than anything. The door closed, and Mason was left standing alone. Since then, the world had felt bigger. Colder. He slept where he could. An old shed behind a broken fence, sometimes under a tree at the edge of town, sometimes just on the ground with his jacket pulled tight around him. The nights were the hardest. Too quiet, too empty, so he walked. Walking gave him something to do. Something to focus on. The hills beyond the pine ridge became his place. No one bothered him there. No one asked questions. It was just wind, trees, and the wide open sky. And then there was the smoke. The second time he saw it, he slowed his steps. Same place, same time, a thin trail rising into the fading light. Mason stopped completely this time, narrowing his eyes as he stared at it. "That's weird," he muttered. No one camped there. The hillside was rough and uneven, covered in loose stones and dry grass. Not the kind of place anyone would choose for a fire, especially not night after night. Still, he told himself it didn't matter. People did strange things. But the third night changed everything. The smoke appeared again, exactly the same. Now it wasn't just strange. It was wrong. Mason stood at the edge of the ridge, watching it carefully. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of something burning down toward him. It wasn't strong, but it was real. Curiosity pulled at him, stronger than before. He adjusted the strap of his bag and started climbing. The slope was steep in places, and small rocks slid under his boots as he moved upward. The trees grew thinner the higher he went, their shadows stretching long across the ground as the sun disappeared behind the horizon. The air felt cooler, quieter. By the time he reached the top, the smoke should have been right in front of him. But when he stepped onto the hillside, it was gone. Mason frowned, looking around. No way. He walked forward slowly, scanning the ground. Nothing. No fire. No ashes. No footprints. The dirt looked untouched, like no one had been there in days. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Then he heard it, a low, steady hum. Mason froze. The sound didn't come from the wind or the trees. It came from below. Slowly, he crouched down and pressed his hand against the ground. For a second, there was nothing. Then, a faint vibration. Real. His heart began to pound. What is this? He lifted his head, scanning the rocks ahead. And that's when he saw it. A faint orange glow, not above ground, but shining through a narrow crack between the stones. Mason took a slow step closer, his breath catching. Because whatever was causing that smoke, it wasn't coming from the surface. It was coming from something hidden deep beneath the hillside. Mason didn't leave the hillside right away. He stayed crouched near the crack, staring at the faint orange glow as if it might disappear the moment he looked away. The air around him felt colder now, heavier somehow, and that low hum beneath the ground continued like a steady heartbeat. For a moment, fear whispered at the back of his mind. Walk away. Pretend you didn't see anything. But he couldn't. Not anymore. Slowly, he leaned closer and brushed loose dirt away from the narrow opening. Small pebbles rolled aside, widening the crack just enough for him to see deeper inside. He held his breath. What he saw didn't make sense. It wasn't a cave. It wasn't natural. Below him was something built. Metal walls reflecting bright artificial light, thick pipes running along the ceiling, and a narrow platform stretching across a large underground space. Shadows moved across the floor as figures walked back and forth, their voices faint but unmistakable. People, working, underground. Mason blinked, trying to process it. "What is this place?" he whispered. He shifted slightly to get a better angle. That's when his hand slipped. A small rock broke loose and fell through the crack. It dropped into the space below. Clink. The sound echoed sharply. Mason froze. Every muscle in his body locked. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the hum changed. It grew sharper, more alert, like a machine switching modes. "Did you hear that?" a voice called from below. Mason's heart slammed against his chest. Another voice answered, "Yeah, above us." Mason pulled back quickly, his breath coming faster now. This was bad, very bad. He started to stand. Then the ground moved. Mason's eyes widened as a section of the hillside just a few yards away shifted unnaturally. Dirt and rock slid aside in a smooth, controlled motion, revealing a hidden door built perfectly into the slope. Light burst out from the opening, cutting through the darkness. Mason dropped instantly, pressing himself flat behind a cluster of stones. Footsteps echoed. 2 men stepped out onto the hillside. They wore dark clothing, heavy boots, and carried flashlights that swept across the ground in sharp beams. Their movements were precise, controlled, like they had done this many times before. "Something fell," one of them said. "Probably just loose rock," the other replied, though his voice didn't sound convinced. "Check anyway." The beam of a flashlight passed dangerously close to Mason's hiding spot. He held his breath. "Don't move. Don't even think." The light shifted away. One of the men walked toward the crack Mason had been looking through. He crouched down, examining the disturbed dirt. Mason's chest tightened. He's going to see it. The widened opening. The marks. Proof someone had been there. Seconds stretched endlessly. The man leaned closer, shining his light into the crack. Mason's heart pounded so loud he was sure they could hear it. Then, "Nothing," the man said, standing up. "Just rocks." The other man scanned the hillside again, slower this time. "I don't like it," he muttered. "We're not supposed to have anyone near this area." Mason swallowed hard. Near this area. That meant him. The 2 men continued searching for another minute, their footsteps crunching against the dry ground, their flashlights sweeping across the rocks. One wrong move, and it would be over. Finally, one of them sighed. "Let's get back. We've got work to finish." The other nodded. They turned and stepped back toward the hidden entrance. The door slid shut behind them with a quiet mechanical sound, sealing itself so perfectly it looked like nothing had ever been there. Silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt heavier, more dangerous. Mason slowly lifted his head, his body still tense. He looked at the spot where the door had disappeared. Then at the crack. Then back again. His mind raced. There was something hidden beneath that hill. Something big, something secret, and whatever it was, they were willing to hide it from everyone. Mason pushed himself to his feet slowly, his eyes still fixed on the hillside. For a moment, he considered leaving, forgetting everything, but the thought didn't last. Because now he knew too much. And one question burned stronger than the rest. What are they hiding down there? Mason didn't sleep that night. He stayed hidden near the edge of the hillside, his back pressed against a cold rock as he watched the place where the ground had opened. The memory of the hidden door, the voices, the light beneath the earth, it all replayed in his mind over and over again. He should have left. Any normal person would have. But Mason wasn't thinking like that anymore. Not after everything he had lost. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he felt something stronger than fear. Purpose. If something dangerous was hidden beneath that hill, someone needed to know. But no one would believe him without proof. So he waited. The night grew darker, the sky filling with stars as the wind moved quietly through the grass. Hours passed, and the hillside remained still. No sound, no light, nothing to suggest what lay beneath it. Until finally, the hum returned, low, steady, alive. Mason's eyes snapped open. "That's it," he whispered. He stood slowly, keeping his movements quiet as he stepped toward the crack in the rocks. The faint orange glow began to return, just like before, seeping through the narrow opening. This time, he didn't hesitate. He picked up a rock and dropped it into the crack. Clang! The sound echoed below. For a second, silence. Then, the ground shifted. Mason stepped back as the hidden door began to open again, dirt sliding aside in a smooth mechanical motion. Bright white light spilled out, cutting through the darkness of the hillside. His heart pounded. This was his chance. Before he could second-guess himself, Mason moved. Fast. He ran forward and slipped inside the entrance just as the door finished opening, pressing himself against the cold metal wall just inside. The air changed instantly. Cool. Artificial. The hum was louder now, vibrating through the walls around him. Mason took a careful breath and looked down the narrow corridor ahead. Bright lights lined the ceiling. Smooth metal surfaces reflected everything. This wasn't just hidden, it was advanced. He moved slowly, keeping close to the wall, his footsteps as quiet as possible. At the end of the corridor, the space opened into something much larger. Mason stopped at the edge. His eyes widened. The underground facility stretched out before him, massive, far bigger than anything he had imagined. Rows of machines filled the space, humming and flashing with lights. Workers moved quickly between stations, checking screens and adjusting equipment. Large metal containers were stacked along one side of the room. Some of them were open. Mason crouched behind a set of crates, trying to stay hidden as he watched. "What is all this?" he whispered. His eyes locked onto one of the open containers. Inside were rows of metal canisters, each marked with bold warning symbols. Not tools, not supplies, something else, something dangerous. Nearby, two workers spoke in low voices. "Shipment leaves tomorrow night. Everything ready. Yeah, once it's out, no one will ever trace it back here." Mason felt a chill run through him. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't good. Suddenly, a loud beep cut through the air. Mason froze. A screen on the far wall lit up in flashing red. "Motion detected," someone shouted. Mason's heart dropped. They knew. "Check the access point," another voice yelled. Footsteps thundered in his direction. Mason didn't think. He ran. Down the corridor, his footsteps echoing against the metal walls. "Hey, stop," someone shouted behind him. He didn't look back. The exit was ahead. But the door, it was closing. The gap shrinking fast. "Come on," Mason gasped, pushing himself faster. Behind him, the footsteps grew louder. Closer. The door was almost shut. With one last burst of speed, Mason lunged forward, sliding through the narrow opening just as it slammed closed behind him. He hit the ground hard, rolling across the dirt of the hillside. Silence. Everything was still again. No light, no sound, no sign anything had happened. Mason lay there for a moment, breathing heavily, staring up at the dark sky. Then slowly, he sat up. His heart was still racing, his mind spinning. "They're hiding something," he whispered. "Something big, something dangerous." He looked back at the quiet hillside one last time. It seemed normal again, harmless. But now he knew the truth. And for the first time since being thrown out of his home, Mason realized something important. He wasn't just a lost kid anymore. He was the only one who knew what was buried beneath that hill. And now, he had to decide what to do with it.